Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we're talking about learning through play with the great leaders of the Windmill School, Sue Krishna, Executive Director, and Jessica Mackall, Director of Education. So in this field, this idea of learning through play, it's ubiquitous, it's somewhat of a cliche, but it takes a particular form at Windmill School. And I'd like you to describe that form and basically the consequences of the 60 years of experience that you've had as you've evolved your approaches for children. So, Sue, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about the 60 years and how you have evolved your methods and your approaches to what children experience today in contemporary California.
Yeah, Windmill, as you mentioned, has been around for over 60 years. So we really are kind of this unique, beautiful program that started in a one-room schoolhouse. And then, just California and logistics of space. And, they were moved from one location to another in the Alpine Tennis Club, and then the time seemed to be coming up there, and therefore the search began for a more permanent home. And so now we are in what was formerly Al's nursery, a beautiful 2-acre piece of land that was full of plants and redwood trees. It's all around us. That is now the permanent home for Windmill School. So we are really fortunate to have this space for children to explore, both indoors and outdoors. It's actually pretty unique, especially in the area that we are, to have this kind of outdoor space to offer children. So that's a real blessing for us. In terms of pedagogy and philosophy, Windmill has stayed true to its mission of being play-based. And that term, I think, has evolved as well over the years. There's a lot of different iterations of, what does it mean to be play-based? And what really do we offer children when we say we're a play-based school? And for us, these 60 years have evolved in looking at how do we merge the term play with learning? What does that look like in theory? What does it look like in practice? So for teachers coming in.
So what you're saying is that learning technical skills, learning reading, writing, social skills, executive function skills, you're saying that those are not at odds of being play-based. Play-based is a methodology for teaching, but it's not different than learning the actual, math skills and these other skills that are required, right?
Not at all. Not at all. And therefore the term learning through play, right? It really is about giving children agency, giving children autonomy to ask questions and drive their learning. But it really is up to the educator to understand what are developmental milestones, how are they age appropriate, what are skills and concepts that need to be introduced in the classroom. How do we get children actually excited about their learning? We can totally, as adults, say, sit down, here's what you're learning, here's the apple that's in front of you. You're going to learn all about an apple and how it grows from a seed. Or we can take them, show them an apple and say, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you think we're going to see if we cut this open? Really, really building the opportunities for them to be curious, for them to ask questions.
So, Jessica, when you think about as director of education, you're talking about at this age, you're talking about a bunch of different skills, and these are foundational for what comes next. How do you play together, for example? How do you reach agreement? Those kinds of things. Could you talk a little bit about your curriculum and how you ensure that you have a very well-rounded basis so that children, even after they leave Windmill School, that they have those kinds of skills?
Yes. So we think about and look at the whole child, right? So each individual child, what do they bring with them? What are some skills that they already have coming into the program, what are skills that they're working on next, and where are they currently, right? That's their zone of proximal development. And really, how can we support them in these next skills that they are working towards? And within that, we also have, the home to school connection, right? So every person to every day, whether they're 3 or, 33, they come in with a set of understanding, a set of, beliefs and biases right from home. And so how can we also then honor that through the environment, through what it is that they're playing, through what it is that they're doing, right? And then going deeper into this, what Sue was mentioning, this inquiry-based learning, right? The understanding of the why, the intentionality behind what it is they're doing. And that's really that emergent interest that happens each day really is what drives the curriculum. We're constantly noting and, we're researchers, right? As teachers, that is one of our biggest jobs. And the children are the protagonists in their learning. They're the ones that are really taking on, their leadership of what it is that they're interested in. And it's our job to be able to say, okay, these children are really showing, for example, Sue said apples. So I'm going to use that same example. These children are really showing that they're interested in how apples grow or the life cycle of an apple. So how can we further that interest? Where can we have it in, maybe these children are interested in certain areas of play. So maybe it's more sensory or building and constructing or in an art space or outside through some gross motor large play. And so finding different ways throughout the whole classroom to be able to bring in the children from all those different areas of interest that they may have. So that way you're reaching all the different children and really being able to support them in their learning process. So then you can hone in on these other skills that Sue was also mentioning where, you are being able to learn through play, whether that's through creating and constructing your own apples, to writing stories about your own apples, to building and creating, through clay or wire or, in some sort of sensory.
So you're describing a very interesting philosophy. What you're basically saying is, as opposed to traditionalist education, which is very top down.
Yes.
We are the experts, we are the educators, we are the adults, right? And we're instructing the children. What you're describing is a process where the children instruct us.
We are co-learners.
That's a very interesting shift in educational philosophy. You have to sort of leave your own expertise at the door and be instructed by those who you will in turn instruct. It's very mutual, isn't it?
It is. And there's a lot of, behind the scenes, so to speak, work that goes into that type of learning with children. So yes, teachers are always, thinking ahead of, we're webbing out different ideas and really trying to think about all the possibilities of where children could take this learning, as we kind of venture it together. However, children are always we may set something in some sort of an invitational way to a child thinking like, oh, okay, with the apples, they are some of them are really interested in counting, right? So we're going to go more mathematical concepts and, let's figure out how many seeds does an apple have? Do all apples have the same amount of seeds, right? Really investigating this piece. But maybe there's children in that group that's where it has started with that invitation, but then they've taken it to a completely different place of they're now using the seeds to create their own numbers or to create their own, categorizations. And maybe that's not something that we had thought about, right? So the children are in that way, it's cyclical. They're always teaching us something as well as, we are a part of their process too.
I also want to piggyback on what Jessica is saying, that this may be happening with 6 children in a class of 18 children, right? This whole interest in apples might be just 6 children, but there's all these other children that are doing different things in the classroom. So there's also all these definitions of programs where, is it inquiry based? Is it theme based? And, these are all fall under the same umbrella of learning through play. So we want to really say, okay, when we say we're inquiry based learning, we're really leaning into the children or the group of children and their interests and co-learning and co-researching with them on that topic. And again, the rest of the children may be in different other areas of the classroom. They could be interested in exploring, wow, there's all these different kind of scissors. Like, how do my hands and fingers need to move to work these scissors and to make what is form and function here? Like, how do I move forward with this tool that I have in my hand. And we also have to be there to support that process for those children. So really the tenets of an inquiry-based curriculum we come back to is observation, documentation, and reflection. So without those three kind of being a parallel process between the teachers and the children, we lose somebody somewhere. So we have, in order to meet the children where they are, we have to really know, okay, this is an interest that's building here. What do I need to do and how do I need to pivot to meet that interest? And what's happening here? And at the same time,
and do they
what are
intersect?
Opportunities to bring these children together in expanding their interest sets?
It's interesting. We've done work with a whole bunch of different inventors, whether it's through the X Prize Foundation or the Simon Laufer Mathematical Sciences Institute. These are people who are inventing whole new mathematical systems that are purpose-built to enable some of the newer technologies, research, explorations that are being undertaken. And it starts with the ability to actually, the power to actually define. And what you're saying is that you're teaching this power to young people so that as they go forward with their own education, they carry that forward, and it could go into quite unanticipated directions. How does that intersect with things like cultural context? Because it's a dead giveaway, right? Mackall, Krishna, and Oppenheim, right? We come from different cultural heritages, and we all have we all grew up with whatever we grew up with. But now you're bringing all these children who similarly are coming in from all these different directions, different ethnicities, different cultures, different religions, different contexts. How do you deal with that? Because you can't just, it's not like we're not all the same in terms of how we think. We're also not all the same in terms of the context. Now you have children coming from their home into your context. How do you deal with that?
I'll tackle the first part of it, Jess, and then I'll hand it over to you. We talk about the triad that surrounds the child in the middle. We talk about the parent, we talk about the teacher, and we talk about the environment. So really, all the three have to be aligned in order to honor and recognize the child that's in the center of it. So our spaces have to reflect that cultural context. We have to offer an invitation to families to make sure that they feel welcome, that we understand and honor who they are in our classrooms and our spaces. And really, it is about goal setting and really taking the time to get to know the family along with the child. It really is a disservice to the child if you say, I don't know your family, I just know you. So it really, building that partnership with families is just as important as building a relationship with the child.
And that was that home to school connection I was referring to earlier, right? Where we're always working alongside each other to understand, okay, how can these interests or these specific contexts that are important to your family, right? These beliefs and biases, how can or how do they align? And if they don't, how can we collaborate, right, to find this sort of middle ground? To be able to honor these pieces for your child to be in this space with us for X amount of hours every day. And so that's something, we're always working towards, is figuring out ways to be able to create those connections. And then how do we build that into our environments to be able to honor?
And I think also when we define family relationships, we almost always lean into the cultural context of children, but there's also this interest context that we have to be aware of, right? For parents, because parents, you may think that, oh, they're from India, and so there's a certain culture that they're bringing with them, but really they may have grown up here, and what might be really important to them is to talk about something that they experienced as Indians growing up in this country. So really, how do we get to know that? So unless we build that relationship with the family and we ask and we say, okay, what's really important to you? How do we bring you into our fold? What do we mean by community? Those are kind of the larger questions that as an administrative team, we have to continually think about. Like, how are we building community amongst the children? How are we building community amongst the families that are on our campus? How do we build that sense of belonging all around?
Yeah, and it seems like what you're also exploring is such a contemporary issue in society, right? How do you honor difference and honor similarity? How do you create the right balance in which the attitudes of the parents are honored, but they don't restrict the growth of a child, right? Not to suggest that any of my attitudes would have had a detrimental impact on my child, but my children have different attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
They just do. And so how do you actually, as an educator, lead parents feeling that you're listening to them, but the child also feels that they get to explore beyond their parents with you? I mean, how does that function? Is it a situation where you just have to keep lines of communication, you're constantly improvising in real time?
Yes, and always coming back and centering on the mission and saying, who are we and who are we here to serve, and keeping the child at the center of it all. Um, Families come in with very different ideas of what education is. Let's start there, even with the idea of, everybody says preschool has to be about play, so that's fine. But I'm coming in here with my own definition of what education means for my child. So we have to be able to hear that. And then we have to center back on who are we as Windmill School? Why do we define play as the best way for young children to learn? And we have to be able to tell the family, we hear you, we understand what it is that you're asking for, and here's how that's happening for your child in the classroom. That's that piece, that communication that has to become really, really centric to all conversations that we're having with families.
Yeah, and I guess it's never done. There is a lot of improvisation. There's a lot of sort of trying to figure it out together with others. I'd like to get into the preschool area, and you have a toddler program, a twos program, and a mixed age program. Could you talk a little bit about those different programs and how they are distinguished one from another? And what is the difference from somebody who has gone through your toddler, twos, and mixed age programs, and those who come in to your mixed age programs who have not gone through the initial programs? How do you treat those people differently?
The difference in the programs, the toddler program is a toddler and caregiver program. So they're coming in, they're starting to, really understand kind of what group care looks like, and do some kind of like a routine together and just start to build that community piece, right? So it's all about, again, like Sue was saying, getting as many people in, onto the campus and being a part of our community as possible. And so that's one way that we're able to start doing that piece. And then the twos and threes, they, are some of them either were part of the toddler and caregiver program. Most of them were not. And so it's more of just giving them these first tastes of what, again, group care setting feels like, having these hours together with, a group of teachers that is somewhat different from their typical caregivers and family, and understanding, going through ideas of like transitions and toileting ideas and eating a snack or a meal together, being able to figure out how to be in spaces together socially, especially as they start to move, from different developmental areas of that social play from, more just that, individual play to a more, parallel play, and then, cooperative and collaborative. And that kind of moves obviously then, through the different ages. So then you get to your mixed age where you have more of these different, dynamics of the children that are really trying to figure out like, okay, like, how do we all learn together in these spaces now that, and having more language, having more ideas, really, thinking about how do I fit into this group, And so teachers are, supporting those different areas of the children's social emotional learning. And that's the social emotional learning, I would say, is probably one of the most important areas that has a focus from toddler all the way through.
So from me to us.
Yes. And that's really, one of the foundational pieces that is being worked on consistently through all of the different groups.
So as a child who came in when I was a child, and my children experienced this as well, we had a lot of disruption in terms of moving to different places. Mm-hmm. And that you also experienced that dynamic with children who come in at an older age to a group of people who know, group of children who know each other. How do you deal with that?
So I think that's the piece, right? And I think previously too, you asked about children, kind of the difference between children who are here as toddlers and move right through, and then children who come in at a later stage. I'll come back to the community piece of it. The children, of course, are a natural cohort of being in shared spaces together. But most of my families will tell me I made my best friends in preschool. Those preschool families became my lifelong friends because it really starts here. You start to connect on what parenting means, like what does that mean in your context, in your community, in your neighborhood. And then they go on together from preschool and they matriculate on to the local schools in the neighborhood. And those friendships are forever. So I have families coming back to me, their children are in their 20s and the parents have remained really good friends. So it's that community piece that we're building along with friendships for the children. For the children, it's consistency of space, consistency of practice, consistency of care, and consistency of focus on and prioritizing who they are as individuals. We've built that whole sense of identity and individuality, starting from them as toddlers all the way to matriculating as a 5-year-old. For those children who come in the mixed age classroom, they're ages 3, 4, 5. The goal is the same, is to say, okay, we have 1 year or maybe 2 years to bring this child into our community. And I think the fact that we center back on understanding and looking at children in a holistic lens and meeting them where they are with, who are you as a person? Who do you bring with you as your family? It creates that sense of belonging so fast for young children. It's about knowing their names. It's about knowing that they just had most preschoolers will say, I had a baby, and we lean into, oh my gosh, yes, you did. You had a baby. It's not about correcting children all the time. It's about leaning into that joy. It's about leaning into the excitement that they're bringing to the classroom every day. And it's those small moments that build those strong connections with children. So would we absolutely adore for all our families to go through from toddlers to their age 5? It doesn't matter because we're centered on making them feel like they belong and that they have a sense of connection.
Really important. I mean, you're making the point that you're serving not only the whole child, but you're serving the whole family.
Absolutely.
Well, right. And so part of this is remaining in constant communication, having a sense of alliance, right, where you're listening to the parents and the child, but also having that communication be bi-directional. So you don't have a vendor type relationship.
No.
It's a different kind of relationship. So I'd like to talk about that last aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So in common business parlance, if you're not expanding, you're not getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then you're not necessarily being successful, right? If you're not providing additional services, sometimes unnecessary, you're not being successful, different products and so on and so forth. But you have here a situation in which bigger would not necessarily serve the purposes that you describe. more transactional, more efficient is not necessarily serving the purposes you describe. Could you talk a little bit about that idea that efficiency, as defined by the ability to more quickly get to the next thing, how that really is not necessarily the way all of society ought to work? Because sometimes I feel like we've been taken over by this idea. We've convinced ourselves that that formula is the best formula. But when it comes down to children, we have a demonstration where that formula is not really the right formula.
That's Windmill School and the mission and the commitment to serve the local community, right? We're not a franchise. We're not all about the board is very committed to saying, who is Windmill School? Windmill School is a local preschool in Portola Valley. We're not looking to be another windmill in the neighboring cities and, expanding as a business, but more so we're continually looking at how are we serving the community that's around us. I have to say, I think what really, really sets Windmill School apart is the preschool, of course, which is the heart and the center of the school. And then we also have this branch of the Laurel Education Center, which really was built very purposefully to serve the community beyond the preschool years. So really looking at partnerships in the local community, whether it's with serving another organization and the young adults that reside there and come back and volunteer with us, or, they are hosting classes here. The scout troops come in and use our spaces. So it really is about widening our reach and really continually bringing the community back together on our campus. So that, I think, sets us apart from any other preschool. We're not just looking to be the best early childhood program for our little ones, but also looking at, once you graduate from here, we will always be a place that you can return to for different reasons.
We do look at the quality, right? Like how it's not about how much or how many, right? It's not that quantity that we're after. It's really the quality of the program, the quality of what we offer, even when you're not a part of the program anymore. And that process, right? We're not product oriented. It's all about process and what that looks like. And it's not linear, right? And it looks different for everybody. And so how can we really honor that within this space in this community here at Windmill?
I think it's something to think about. How do we define ourselves? How to define our mission in life? Is it to get bigger, bigger, bigger? There's nothing wrong with getting bigger if we're actually advantaging others. But if it's getting bigger just to get bigger, maybe we should be focusing on something else, which is, raising children, having a healthy community, having a healthy environment, respect for each other, not stoking conflict. If getting bigger is going to have negative consequences, maybe we should be listening to Windmill School and your teams as you help to educate children in Portola Valley. Sue Krishna, Executive Director, and Jessica Mackall, Director of Education of the Windmill School, thank you so much for sharing your work. Please thank your boards. Please thank your parents. Please thank your funders. Please thank your staff. Please thank your children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.